What a game in Phoenix. The Houston Rockets going toe-to-toe with the number one team in the NBA, the Phoenix Suns, falling just a little bit short at the end there, unfortunately. But a great game. So many great things to pick apart from this one. Dennis Schroder and how he is objectively a good thing for this Rockets team. How is he helping the Rockets when he is on the floor? Alperen Sengun with the best game of his career against one of the better centers in the league in Deandre Ayton. Jalen Green finding success playing next to Dennis Schroder. All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, and also host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. Now, today's episode is brought to you by RockAuto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit RockAuto.com and tell them Locked On sent you by. As always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. Such a great game to talk about here. Honestly, when we got the news that Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood were going to be out for this game due to illness, I guess non-COVID-19 illness, I kind of was scratching my head thinking, you know what? This is probably going to be a blowout, and it's probably going to sting, and it's not going to be a super competitive game. And oh boy, was I ever wrong. This was an incredible game, and we're going to talk about just kind of the flow of this game, the ending, just the competitive nature of it all throughout the game. Talk about Dennis Schroder and the impact that he is making on this Rockets team and how he is objectively a good thing for this Rockets team. Alperen Sengun having the best game of his career. Jalen Green looking good, playing next to a natural veteran point guard. All of that we're going to get into. So where I want to start, though, is first off, the evening went awry when it was announced what the starters were going to be. About 30 minutes before tip-off, I could tell everybody was already distraught that Dennis Schroder was in the starting lineup over Josh Christopher. And frankly, I didn't really have an issue with it because at the end of the day, Josh Christopher is a rookie. Dennis Schroder is a proven veteran at the NBA level. So yeah, you're missing KPJ and Christian Wood. So the Rockets rolling out a starting lineup of Jalen Green, Eric Gordon, Dennis Schroder, Jae'Sean Tate, and Alperen Sengun. That was the right move. And boy, did it pay off. This Rockets team looked damn good for the majority of this game, going toe-to-toe with the number one team in the NBA. That's impressive stuff. Now, maybe you chalk it up a little bit to the fact that the Phoenix Suns were kind of sleeping on the Rockets a little bit. They didn't come in as prepared as they needed to be. But this Rockets team fought hard. They shared the basketball. They were fighting tooth and nail defensively, playing some of the best basketball that I've seen all season from them on both sides of the basketball floor. And you have to point to Dennis Schroder's impact and what he did both offensively and leading the charge defensively as to why this Rockets team found so much success. And this game was a perfect example of what Dennis Schroder can truly bring to this Rockets team. But I want to get in on that, more in just a moment. Specifically, kind of want to go through the game flow here in just a moment, because this game, the Rockets were largely in control of this game all the way through the fourth quarter, right? So they finished the first quarter leading the Suns. They went into halftime with an 8-point lead on the Suns. Granted, top of the second quarter, they had some shaky turnovers there. It looked like they, maybe they were getting ready to kind of unravel a little bit. And then in the third quarter, that's when Dennis Schroder kind of took over a little bit. So Jalen Green was hot to start the game in the first quarter and did pick up 3 early fouls, and that was a bit concerning given how well Jalen Green was playing to start the game. He hit he hit a couple early threes. He had that lob from Dennis Schroder in transition that was just electric, and it sucked because he picked up those 3 early fouls, and so he had to go sit down immediately. Steven Silas trusted Jalen Green to come back in in the second quarter and play with those 3 fouls. And that was huge, right? That's Steven Silas trusting his rookie. Hey, you've got 3. Don't go pick up your 4th because I want you in the game. I need you in the game. And Jalen Green did a good job of continuing to play solid defense without picking up more fouls. So great signs from Jalen Green, great learning opportunity for him. But yeah, big start from Jalen Green. Second quarter rolls along. The Rockets are sharing the basketball. They're moving. They're playing with a lot of pace. They're getting out in transition. They're doing all the things that you want to see this young Rockets basketball team do. Third quarter comes along and Dennis Schroder starts to kind of take over the game. I believe he had 12 of his 20-something points in that quarter. Yeah, Dennis Schroder finished with 23, and I believe he had 12 in that quarter specifically. Really starting to kind of, take over the game a little bit. And it was that top of the fourth quarter where things started to get really shaky for this Rockets team. So the Phoenix Suns reeled off a 12-0 run to start the fourth quarter. And the Rockets, credit to them, they fought their way back into it. Despite the 12-0 run, at one point, Dennis Schroder called for a huddle as the Rockets were going to the free throw line. He called up for a huddle. And I remember even Ryan Hollins was highlighting it on the broadcast, just saying that this was, the veteran leadership that Dennis Schroder can help provide, that he's calling for a huddle as the Rockets are struggling in the midst of this, 10-0, 12-0 at that point Phoenix run, and just kind of trying to rally the troops, right? Get them together, get everybody on the same page. And it helped. It worked. The Rockets were able to fight their way back into this game despite giving up a free 12 points at the top of the quarter to give the Phoenix Suns the lead at the top of the fourth after the Rockets had led the game for the majority of this one. And it was the end of this game. I mean, it was kind of a trip. I missed one part here in my notes. The fact that Chris Paul did get ejected in the third quarter, which was kind of a trip to see. There was a play where Chris Paul had tried to whip a pass around Jae'Sean Tate's shoulder, and his wrist had smacked into, I think, Jae'Sean Tate's upper body or his shoulder or something, because again, CP3 tried to throw the pass right over Jae'Sean's shoulder. And afterwards he thought there should have been a foul or something on Jae'Sean Tate, even though Chris made contact with him. It was a very weird circumstance. And so afterwards, the pool reporter explained that Chris Paul was ejected because he fired off an explicative at one of the officials. So he said the magic F word, probably. So that was technical number 1. And then apparently he made contact with one of the officials later on, which was the reason for the second technical and his subsequent ejection. So the Phoenix Suns not at full strength for the tail end of this game. They still come away with the W because they are a very well-oiled machine, even without Chris Paul. But it was just another, a weird game just got even weirder, right? The Rockets were leading the best team in the NBA for the majority of the game. And then Phoenix loses its point guard in Chris Paul because he gets frustrated off of a weird, phantom call. I don't know. It was a very weird circumstance. But back to the top of the fourth quarter, the 12-0 run, the Rockets were able to fight their way back into this. Eric Gordon drilled a 3 to make it just a 1-possession game, a 2-point game, 111-109. And that was where the Rockets really started to mount their comeback late in the fourth quarter. On the very next possession, Alp gets a drive on DeAndre Ayton. And this was just the capper on a really amazing night for Alp. Any Rockets fans who remember Austin Rivers, that Alp has kind of adopted this little signature drive that Rivers would do when he was on the strong side, and they would empty out the strong side and Rivers would just drive baseline with nobody in his way and use his quick speed, speed athleticism to get to the rim and just scoop it up for an easy 2. Alp did that, but to DeAndre Ayton in the middle of the floor. So he gave him a little quick back and forth with the hands, and then drove right and finished past DeAndre Ayton at the rim, giving the Rockets a tie game at 111 all. So huge move from Alp, giving him to matching Alp's career high at that point, 19 points. Then on the following possession, Jalen Green hit a huge 3-pointer to give the Rockets a 3-point lead that didn't last super long, unfortunately, because Cam Johnson came back down, splashed a 3-pointer of his own, making it 114 across the board. Then a couple possessions later, Mikal Bridges hits this weird driving hook shot, push shot in the paint. It kind of looked like he may have traveled on that possession, but the refs didn't call it. tough luck there, unfortunately for the Rockets, makes it 116-114 at the tail end of the game. And then on the very next possession, Jae'Sean Tate lost the ball out of bounds. He was getting ready to drive in baseline off the kick out pass and just took his eyes off the ball for a split second. And it just just kind of whimpered out of bounds. And that was like a tough play to stomach, given how well the Rockets had played to that point and how good they had been about not turning the ball over against this Phoenix Suns team for the most part. So then on the following possession, Devin Booker tries to put the dagger in the Houston Rockets, pulls up for a three-pointer, completely airmails it, like doesn't draw iron, net, nothing, no backboard, but it lands directly in the lap of Mikal Bridges because of course, and Bridges is able to just elevate and put it back up for two. So it gives the Suns a 4-point lead with barely any time remaining. And at that point, it was almost like the Rockets could have hung their heads and just been like, yeah, it's game over. But they got it up the court in a hurry. Dennis Schroder pushing it up all the way up the court and hit a cutting Jae'Sean Tate for two at the rim. Suns had to inbound the ball. They, and it basically became a trading free throw game. The Rockets were able to get a couple more buckets in. EG got a slashing layup. Then EG hits a three, a couple possessions later. They're trading back and forth free throws with the Suns, but unfortunately the Suns never missed enough free throws for the Rockets to tie the game. And then it did come back down to, though, the final possession of the game where the Rockets drew up a play with about 2 seconds left on the clock, and EG had like an okay look at it, I suppose. It wasn't the best of looks, and given the fact that EG couldn't throw it into the Grand Canyon in this game, one of his worst shooting performances of the season, I would have liked to see the shot go to literally anybody else on the floor, except for maybe Dennis Schroder. But Garrison Matthews, Jalen Green, give one of those guys the ball, honestly, at that point, because Garrison Matthews as well wasn't having a phenomenal game, but just EG was completely struggling from beyond the arc, just 3 of 14 shooting overall. The Rockets were in it. They had a chance to force this thing into overtime, and unfortunately, it just slipped away from them at the very end. But this is exactly the type of performance you want to see from this young Rockets team, a really competitive game against the best team in the association. I can't think of a better way for this Rockets team to have lost this game. It would have been great to get the win, but this is everything you want to see from this Rockets team over the course of a game. I have a few small gripes that I'm going to get to in segment 3, but I do want to focus on Dennis Schroder and his impact coming up, as well as Alperen Sengun and the best game of his career to this point. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. Because look, football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full strength for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information that you are after. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, where the game starts. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, be sure to check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from local experts, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's dive into the impact of one Dennis Schroder and just exactly what he was doing in this basketball game specifically. Now, again, first off, I think Rockets fans absolutely owe Dennis Schroder an apology, because I was cautiously optimistic about what he was going to bring to the table. Now, I also didn't like the way that Josh Christopher's minutes got pushed to the side in favor of Dennis Schroder in his debut with the Houston Rockets against the Utah Jazz. But even Steven Silas postgame explained that only happened because of, XYZ thing earlier in the game. I couldn't get Dennis subbed in where I wanted him, all of that, right? And in this game, Dennis Schroder was obviously one of the starters, which is why he played as many minutes as he did in this game. And he was having an objectively good game. Dennis Schroder provides this team with exactly what you would have liked to see John Wall provide this team, which is the backup point guard, veteran presence, get other guys involved, lead by example defensively, do all those little things. And that's exactly what Dennis Schroder provided the Rockets in this game and will hopefully continue to provide off the bench upon Kevin Porter Jr.'s return to the starting lineup. Now, you may be asking yourself, the Rockets already had DJ Augustin, and he was doing a great job. This is not necessarily a knock on DJ Augustin. DJ was a great facilitator, like in the half court, and he did do a good job of setting guys up. But DJ Augustin is a bit over the hill and is not nearly the defender that Dennis Schroder is, and he cannot play with nearly the level of tempo and pace that Dennis Schroder does in the open court. So those are two areas that the Rockets desperately need help with, was, getting guys in the open floor, getting easy opportunities in transition, which Dennis Schroder is elite at. That's exactly his play style. And then defensively, not being, completely susceptible at the point of attack on the defensive end. And DJ Augustin, I'm sorry, he was not a great defender. He's just not at that point in his career anymore. And even earlier in his career, like, he's undersized, he's smaller on that end of the floor. There's a lot of things, right? So with Dennis Schroder, the Rockets now have a legitimate backup point guard option and two stabilizing veteran presences to have on the floor to anchor both the starters and the bench unit. And here's the kicker, right? The Rockets don't necessarily have to play both of those guys like to close out games, and I don't expect them to. Now, maybe there's a night where Eric Gordon and Dennis Schroder both have it going, right? So they decide to close with both of them in the lineup. But my assumption at this point is that the Rockets will largely probably lean on just one of those guys to close out games, right? So like if EG is struggling in a given game, then maybe you close out with Dennis Schroder in the closing lineup instead of Eric Gordon, right? This gives Steven Silas that flexibility to have yet another veteran presence to lean on. That way, if Eric Gordon is struggling, you don't have to leave him out there just because he's the only vet that you can rely on in those crunch time situations to help kind of rally the troops and calm things down on the floor. Dennis Schroder gives you another option for that, right? He gives you a guy who can facilitate, who can get others involved. He finished this game with 23 points on 7 of 16 shooting, just 2 of 7 from behind the three-point line, was 7 of 8 at the free throw line. You love to see that number there. And the Rockets as a team were actually incredible at the free throw line, shooting 24 of 28 from the charity stripe, which is just very impressive for this Rockets team that has largely struggled with free throw shooting all season long. Schroder also had 6 boards, had 9 assists, had a steal, had a block, did have 6 turnovers because he was, again, trying to orchestrate the entire offense for the majority of the game. He played 39 minutes in this one. So, of course, that's to be expected that there's going to be some turnovers involved, all of that. But overall, the way that he looks to get others involved, the way that he is running this Rockets offense, you can tell he is truly a veteran point guard. For the majority of the season, the Rockets truly haven't had a backup point guard. Josh Christopher is not a point guard. DJ Augustin, in the spot minutes that he played, yes, he's your backup. He was at points your backup point guard throughout this Rockets season. But largely, the Rockets have actually been using Eric Gordon as their backup point guard. And if you don't want to call Eric Gordon a point guard, fine. They've been using him as their backup primary ball handler, if you will, because that's basically been the dynamic for the majority of the season once they kind of settled on the starting lineup that we know that we've been so accustomed to in KPJ, Jalen Green, Eric Gordon, Jae'Sean Tate, Christian Wood. Oftentimes, Eric Gordon and Jae'Sean Tate tend to be one of the first substitutions out of the game. And then later, Eric Gordon checks back into the game when KPJ hits the bench, right? And then Eric Gordon is the guy kind of running some of the offense. Now, Eric is a vet, and he's been in the NBA for a long time. So even though he's not a natural point guard, he can still run and coordinate an offense a little bit, right? It doesn't look as natural as when another point guard is doing it, like Dennis Schroder, because that's not his true natural position. That's not what he's thinking about doing on the floor. He's thinking about creating for himself, not creating for others. Sometimes his gravity will lend to being able to create buckets for his teammates, but that's just not EG's game. Whereas Dennis Schroder, you're watching him actively look to get others involved, realize, okay, this person's hot. I need to get them the ball. Okay, this person's cutting in transition. Let's get them the pass. Oh, Alp's posting up. Let me get the ball down to him, right? It's the awareness that Dennis Schroder has about where certain guys are and how to get other guys involved. And I do want to end this segment by explaining that this is not and should not be considered a knock on Kevin Porter Jr. Kevin Porter Jr. has grown tremendously as he's been adapting and becoming used to being the point guard on the floor, and has done a tremendous job of learning and realizing that he, as the point guard on the floor, is the one in charge of dictating the pace of the game, right? When to speed it up, when to slow it down, when to get certain guys involved, when to recognize, okay, this guy's got it going. Great. I'm going to get him the basketball. Okay. Nobody on the team has it going. everybody's getting locked up. Let me see if I can create something for myself, right? Get the offense going that way. And KPJ's done a very masterful job of learning that position on the fly. But now the Rockets have a true proven veteran point guard that they can lean on in Dennis Schroder off the bench, who can continue to kind of anchor that or supplant that if there's a night where potentially KPJ is kind of struggling, right? And we've seen the Rockets offense without KPJ and Alperen Sengun on the floor absolutely struggle to create any sort of quality good looks. And so this game is kind of, I hope it's the catalyst for Rockets fans to really see how beneficial Dennis Schroder can be in a Rockets jersey and how important it is to have another stabilizing force on the bench for this team so that they can play in competitive games like this one. Like having the opportunity to potentially knock off the Phoenix Suns at the tail end of this game after fighting so hard and leading for the majority of it. I'm not a big fan usually of like motivational victories or moral victories or whatever. Motivational victories. That's not, ignore the word moral. So but this game is exactly that, because this Rockets team fought so hard and came up just a little bit short, but it was against the best team in the NBA. That's something to be proud of. You walk away from this game feeling really, really good about the way that everybody on this roster played. Yeah, there are some small gripes to be had here and there. Yeah, there's question marks about what this team is going to look like when Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood step back on the floor. Shout out to Ryan Hollins, who at one point said, nobody's trying to be Christian Wood out there on the floor, and then also follow that up by saying that that everybody is willing to share the basketball on the floor because they know they're going to get it back. And that to me was like pretty wild, honestly, because at the end of the day, Christian Wood does turn into a black hole sometimes offensively. And we didn't really see that in this game. Everybody was willing to share the basketball, move the basketball around, generate good looks for each other. And it's exactly the type of basketball that you want to see out of this Rockets team. So I think Rockets fans owe Dennis Schroder an apology, because he's going to be an important part of this Rockets team for the remainder of the season. And it's clear now. It was the lines were kind of blurred before as to why they brought him in. I was cautiously optimistic about what he could bring to this team, but now the lines are clear. Rafael Stone, Steven Silas, they know what they're doing as far as incorporating him into this Rockets team and how beneficial he will be to all the other guys on this Rockets roster, especially Josh Christopher. Now, that is one last point here, right, is Josh Christopher, as long as his minutes don't shrink too much because of Dennis Schroder, then I am still all for the Dennis Schroder experience. But in this game, Josh Christopher was the low man as far as minutes, with just 11 minutes played off the bench. Now, granted, they did have to lean on David Nwaba in this game for a chunk of minutes, playing 16 in this one because they didn't have Christian Wood, so they didn't have a backup center in this game. So KJ Martin absorbing the backup center minutes. So in the Rockets regular rotation, as long as Jacob is able to hit about 15 minutes a night-ish, give or take, and a majority of those being played alongside Dennis Schroder, I will be perfectly okay with this experiment moving forward. I did ask on Twitter how everybody was feeling, how Rockets fans are feeling about the Dennis Schroder experience. Or experiment, I should say. So I'm going to read just a couple of those off before we get to our next segment. But from big friend of the show, Ed at In the Fast Lane Ed on Twitter, he's exactly what I was hoping the 45 million man could be for this team. The ultimate cheerleader / safety net as the youngins learn in real time on the floor. Don't expect nothing crazy from him, but just let the kids grow. Exactly my sentiments, Ed. You know, this is exactly what the Rockets hoped that John Wall could be for this team. Another one from at 2017 World Series champions, David on Twitter. Give him whatever Wood was going to make in free agency and send 35 to Mars. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so that's kind of the opinion right now on Dennis Schroder. A couple more here. From at Jalen Green 03 with like a million threes in the at, so I don't know, all the E's are threes. But I think he's owed an apology, TBH. I was really out on him playing over Josh, but if they can find a way to have them both play consistent minutes off the bench, then that's heaven. And then one more here from at Astro Rocket. He's doing really well tonight and helping Jalen a ton. Ball movement has been excellent. He keeps this up and he'll really help with the young guys' development. Exactly what we wanted to see out of him. So yeah, I think Rockets fans, if you were anti Dennis Schroder, you've got to start issuing some apologies. And shout out to the cult on Twitter. I won't say it, but shout out to the cult on Twitter who have been supporting Dennis Schroder from the moment that he became a Houston Rocket. So coming up, want to talk about Alperen Sengun and his dominant career game in this one against the Suns and Deandre Ayton, as well as final thoughts from this game. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at RockAuto.com. Because look, with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's basically impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why endure the often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your car an LX, EX, like all this stuff, right? And you got to wait while the person's trying to order the parts online. Just go to RockAuto.com. You can save time and money when using RockAuto. Why choose to spend up to 30, 50, or even 100% more for the exact same auto parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Best of all, RockAuto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. At the end of the day, their prices are always going to be reliably low. They don't price gouge you for certain, materials. They don't price gouge you for being a DIY person, right? So if you're somebody who knows how to do a little fixer up on your own car, then check out rockauto.com. They've got everything that you could need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even brand new carpet. So go explore their super easy to use website and find the solution to your auto parts needs. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And this is a really important part. Be sure to write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Be sure to visit rockauto.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, be sure to go check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Make a little bit of money with Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, how can I talk about this game and not want to highlight, first off, pretty much all the Rockets starters, including then KJ Martin as well off the bench, all had really solid games. Eric Gordon was probably the one starter that, struggled with his efficiency offensively, but despite that, still posting 20 points on 8 of 24 is a bit abysmal, honestly. But past that, all the Rocket starters having a really solid all-around game, and then KJ Martin off the bench was really impressive. We'll talk about him in a minute. But Alperen Sengun, in just his 5th career NBA start, posted 19 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, 7 of 11 shooting, 3 of 4 from beyond the three-point line. Alperen Sengun, always 2 of 2 at charity stripe. Just an incredibly impressive performance from Alp, going toe-to-toe with Deandre Ayton, one of the better centers in the NBA. And you could make the argument that Alp outplayed Deandre Ayton in this game. Ayton finished the night with 23 points and 9 rebounds on 9 of 15 shooting, was 5 of 6 at the free throw line, didn't have any assists, didn't have any steals, only had the 1 block. I would argue Alperen Sengun had a better night at the 5 spot than Deandre Ayton did. That's impressive for a kid. Alp is the future. This is exactly the type of game that makes it really hard for the next game when Christian Wood comes back and takes the starting spot back, because Alp absolutely played out of his mind, and the offense looks so much better out there with Alperen Sengun willing to share the basketball, move things around, get others involved. And a big takeaway of mine from this game is, with Alp out there and with Dennis Schroder out there in the starting lineup, it actually felt like Jalen Green was being highlighted as the focal point in the Rockets offense, especially early on, because everybody on the floor in that Rockets starting 5 was willing to move the ball to the next man. And so a lot of times in possessions that would normally end with Christian Wood, taking one of his looks or posting up or what have you, or the ball just not moving enough, those passes would then find their way to Jalen Green, which is why he got off to such a strong start in this game. Now, that kind of waned as the game went on, unfortunately, because this group of guys just hasn't played together long enough. But we've talked a lot about the Rockets not having a true hierarchy or a pecking order in their starting lineup. And when Alp is out there, he has zero issue deferring to other guys on the floor. He hit some really amazing little cutting passes to guys who were flashing through the lane. He hit Jae'Sean for a really easy one somewhere, I think top of the 3rd quarter, give or take. things just looked really, really good for Alp. He was playing within the flow of the offense, and those three balls, those were probably the biggest, most standout thing. Is he was still hesitant on a couple of them, but it got to the point where he was just pulling them with confidence. And that's exactly what he's got to be able to do to be a 5 at the NBA level and to kind of stretch the floor out and open up more opportunities for himself, for his teammates to not clog the paint when he's out there. And if he can consistently hit the 3 ball, I don't expect him to shoot 75% from 3 every single game, but if he can just be slightly more consistent than he's been up to this point, then I mean, Alp is going to, he's got future star written all over him. That's all I can say about it, right? And defensively, Steven Silas highlighted Alp's defensive focus in this game because he was guarding the pick and roll so well. Obviously, this is a Phoenix Suns team that runs a heavy amount of pick and roll with Devin Booker and with Chris Paul. And so guarding the pick and roll is crucial against this Suns team. With Chris Paul getting the boot in the third quarter, obviously that changed the complexion of things, but Devin Booker was still running a steady diet of pick and roll, throughout the final, 18 minutes of this one. And Alp did a really great job when he was on the floor of guarding in the pick and roll, of making sure that he defended properly, making, switching when he needs to, dropping when he needs to, covering the right guys. And I think that's been a big part of Alp's game that's been kind of a question mark is, yeah, he hustles defensively, but at times he's hustling and he's not, in the right spot at the right time. And that leads to fouls and issues here and there. But overall, just a really, really impressive game from Alperen Sengun. And again, it's a damn shame that he's going to go back to being saddled on the bench when Christian Wood inevitably returns to this Rockets lineup and that's one of the reasons that I was truly disappointed that Christian Wood didn't get moved at the deadline, because even if the offers weren't there, Alp is the future of this franchise at the 5. And it's not going to be Christian Wood. And unless those two guys can learn to coexist on the floor together, which at this point I kind of have my doubts of them being able to succeed on the floor with one another, Wood is just directly in the way of Alperen Sengun. And at this point, the Rockets need to find a way this summer, maybe at the draft, whatever, to deal Christian Wood so that Alp can be the starting 5 of the future, starting alongside Jabari Smith Jr. So there we go. Had to throw in my one little tidbit about the NBA draft, but really great game from Alperen Sengun. A really quality night from Jae'Sean Tate as well. Just going to speed through the rest of the starters very quickly. 22 points, 10 rebounds, 1 assist on 7 of 9 shooting for Jae'Sean. 8 of 8 at the free throw line. Those are great numbers for Jae'Sean Tate. I mean, he was getting fouled. He was making free throws. He was cutting. He was finishing at the rim. Only had to attempt the 1 3-point shot, missed it. But just an overall impressive stat line from Jae'Sean Tate in a game where he kind of had to help anchor that front court, especially in the minutes where Alperen Sengun wasn't on the floor to kind of body DeAndre Ayton and JaVale McGee and the other bigs for the Phoenix Suns. Shout out to Jae'Sean Tate and David Nwaba and KJ Martin, who all kind of held their own as like the small ball 4s and 5s in this Rockets offense. Already talked about Dennis Schroeder's stat line. Eric Gordon with 20 points on 8 of 24 shooting, just 3 of 14 from the 3-point line. Did have 2 boards and 2 assists, as well as a block in his 38 minutes played. I would have liked to see Eric Gordon and Jalen Green's like field goal attempts, maybe not necessarily flipped, because I do think it is asking a lot for Jalen Green to have 24 shot attempts in a given game, as much as Rockets fans would love to see that. But some of Eric Gordon's shot attempts should have been diverted to Jalen Green, right? There's no reason that as hot as Jalen Green started this game, that he only finished with 12 shot attempts. And I do think that is kind of an issue moving forward, is the Rockets need to place an emphasis on allowing Jalen Green the opportunity with, not necessarily just with the rock in his hands, but just to finish possessions, right? Because I do think there is something to be said for, yeah, Jalen has looked good with the ball in his hands, but with a true point guard on the floor in Dennis Schroder and with Kevin Porter Jr. looking as good as he has looked, setting other guys up, you don't necessarily have to have the ball in his hands. Just let him get more shots. And I think some of that does fall back on Jalen Green, right? Rockets fans need to realize that there are plenty of times where Jalen Green defers to other players on the floor. And I do think that maybe, maybe Steven Silas needs to get in his ear, or John Lucas needs to get in his ear and just be like, no, you take those shots. You're the number 2 overall pick. You're the future of the franchise. Take those shots. Go out, get 20 shot attempts a night, period. And if maybe it's just, maybe it's a mentality thing with Jalen, not a confidence thing, but maybe it's just he's wanting to defer and get his teammates involved. And he's being at times a little bit overly passive when he could just take the ball, go head down and drive it to the rim and create contact and get opportunities that way. He was great about doing that in this game. He finished with 17 points, again, on 5 of 12 shooting. 3 of 7 at the 3-point line, 4 of 5 at the charity stripe, had 2 rebounds, had an assist, had a block. Didn't really handle the rock a ton in this game, again, because the majority of that fell on Dennis Schroder, and Dennis Schroder only missed 9 minutes on the floor. So, and then KJ Martin off the Rockets bench was, just some of the dunks that he had in this game. He had the one in transition where he got fed the ball and just went up and completely yammed it and got the and one opportunity, converted on it at the free throw line. He had a number of them running in the pick and roll where he would just get fed a bounce pass in the pick and roll and just elevate and yam it on top of the rim. He had the one from David Nwaba going kind of baseline pick and roll kind of later on in the game, and David Nwaba hit him with the bounce pass perfectly, and KJ just elevated and smashed the ball home with his left hand, and it was a really impressive dunk. That was a I should have been in the damn dunk contest type of dunk from KJ Martin, in all honesty. But he continues to just be that super infectious energy guy off the bench, played small ball 5, looked good doing it. And solid night from KJ Martin. The rest of the Rockets bench provided energy at times, but didn't do a whole lot else in this game. David Nwaba and Garrison Matthews are, pretty quiet nights for the two of them. David Nwaba obviously getting the nod because no Christian Wood, so kind of shortening up the rotation or needing to dig deeper into the Rockets bench for this one. And then Josh Christopher, despite the 1 for 8 shooting numbers, was so incredibly active being Josh Christopher. He had 7 rebounds, 4 of them on the offensive glass. Also had 2 assists. He did have a block. So even though the shot wasn't falling for Josh Christopher in this game, he was still energetic. He was still finding ways to be impactful. And that's exactly what you want to see out of Josh Christopher. He's not hanging his head. He's not upset that he's, now kind of being pushed to being the last guy in the rotation behind Dennis Schroder. He could be, right? He could be super upset. He could be, moping around and out there not giving his all, but that's not the type of person he is. That's not the type of player he is. If anything, he's just going to double down and work harder and smarter and even better to make sure that he still proves to this coaching staff, yeah, I'm still worthy of these minutes, right? Yeah, Dennis Schroeder's providing, that point guard veteran presence that we need, sure, but I still want to get my minutes on a nightly basis, and I have no worries that Josh Christopher is going to be able to do that on a regular basis moving forward. So that's it from this game. Final thoughts on this one. As always, appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, brand new Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Also, check out the new Locked On Rockets YouTube channel. Search Locked On Rockets on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. What was your favorite part from this Rockets game against the Suns? How are you feeling about Dennis Schroder as a Houston Rocket so far? Let me know in the comments. I do read every single one of those, and I try to reply when I can. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.